our hands together to welcome the arrival of our guest of honor, Mr. Desmond Lee, Minister for National Development and Minister in charge of Social Services Integration. Good afternoon, Mr. Desmond Lee, esteemed guests, our board and senior management. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the third Tiang's Distinguished Lecture Series, Speaking Up for Mental Health. I'm Wilin, Senior Manager supporting the development and engagement functions at the Mind Science Center together with the team. Thank you for taking the time to be with us in person and via our live webinar today. We're glad to have over 400 sign-ups for this event. This is certainly encouraging. Today's hybrid event, titled the Third Tiang Distinguished Lecture Series, Speaking Up for Mental Health, is held at Goodwood Park Hotel and is made possible by the generous donations by the Tao family. My Science Center is deeply grateful and would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Tao Heng Tan and family for the support of our programs and research in mental health. As with our distinguished donors, volunteers, partners, and many other supporters, some of whom are here with us in person today, and many others via online. Thank you so very much. The highlights of today's program include the launch of the Profiles in Resilience book, featuring 20 inspiring and amazing individuals, including none other than our very own Professor Kwa Ee-hyok, advisor of the Mind Science Center, and Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi, NUS Board of Trustees and former Speaker of Parliament. To mark this special occasion, the book will be officiated by Mr. Desmond Lee, our Minister and Guest of Honor, in just a bit. The other exciting highlight of today, we have a very special guest. He's none other than Singapore's King of Swing and Cultural Medallion winner, Maestro Jeremy Monteiro, who has been actively contributing to both the jazz, music, and mental health scene. Sharing is titled, Music is Good for My Mental Health. Indeed, mind-stimulating. As we tune out to the rhythm of things, let's now welcome Associate Professor John Wong Chi-Meng on stage to give us the welcome address. Prof. John Wong is a Lin Jo-Yen and Yo Boon Kim Professor in Mental Health and Neuroscience and is the Director of Mind Science Center. Prof. Wong, please.
Our former Speaker of Parliament and Member of Board of Trustee NUS, Dr. Cheong Choon Kong, our Chairman of Board of Advisor, My Science Center, Professor Tan Eng Chai, our President of NUS, and Professor Chong Yap Seng, our Dean of NUS Yong Lin School of Medicine. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the My Science Center, we would like to warmly welcome you present here at the Tudor Ballroom, as well as our participants over at the webinar, to this afternoon's Speaking Up for Mental Health series. As you have heard, this mental health series comprised of Mr. To Tiao Seng lecture, which will be delivered by Mr. Jeremy Monteiro, as well as hosted by Professor Kwa Ee-hyok. And also, we also take the opportunity to have a book launch on the Profiles in Resilience, edited by Professor Kwa and Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi, and the other 18 distinguished Singaporean pioneers who wrote the book. And of course, some are not that pioneer in age, but they are really pioneer in their achievement in their life journey. This lecture series is made possible by the generous donation of Mr. To Heng Tan through the educational grant that he provided. The My Science Center focuses on building an undefeated mind. And together with our faculty of clinicians as researchers, working alongside with our community partners, we have worked to build an upstream evidence-based approach to help build mental health and mental resilience across ages. Focusing on Asian culture, lifestyle, and phenotype to develop population-based innovative, holistic solutions that are uniquely Asian. One of the flagship translational research program is the Jurong Aging Research Study. It has gone on for the last 10 years, and this has very nicely and translated into the Age Well Everyday Program. In short, we call it AWE. And it helps to mitigate the impact of aging and reduce the risk of dementia and depression in the elderly in the community in a fun and enjoyable environment. Expanding across the age continuum, we have also delved into research in adolescents through our Youth Epidemiology and Resilience Study, the YEAR study, and works are also in progress to launch our new incubation space, chaired by Linda, who is present here, in the Art Science Council, and that will help to do research in the areas that will reap the benefits of mindfulness as well as art on the mind. It has been a purposeful journey to where we are today for Mind Science Center. And in honor of our founding chairman of Mind Science Center, the late Mr. Wee Sin To, who inspired and helped establish the focus and direction of Mind Science Center, a memorial fund was set up with the consent and support of Mrs. Wee and her family, and we are very grateful for that. This memorial fund was set up to help consolidate the support given to our mission. As an organization dedicated to building mental resilience across the demographic profiles, the Mind Science Center has invested in continuous research and roll out evidence-based intervention program in the community. This effort have touched the lives of many. And these are made possible with your support and generous education and research donations. I would like to express my greatest gratitude to all, both donors as well as volunteers who have contributed both in kind and in financial terms to support the cause of the Mind Science Center in building Undefeated Mind. With your generous support, we are happy to report that the Memorial Fund has been very well received and continues to receive support, and we are gradually closing to meeting our targets, hopefully in the next 6 months. And this will be channeled to initiatives to strengthen the research and translational program in mental resilience in the community. Without further ado, we would like to start our first segment on introducing the new book from Nature and Mindfulness Awareness Study, NAMA, Profiles in Resilience. So let us now invite our Professor Tommy Koh, Faculty of Law at National University of Singapore, Ambassador at Large, to give a book review of Profiles in Resilience. Professor Koh, please.
Thank you, John. It's dangerous for old people to climb up and down. So I think I will speak from here. You all can see me, right? Yeah. Professor Kwa, Speaker Abdullah, all the distinguished writers, ladies and gentlemen. I want to begin by greeting some important people in the audience. First, I wish PM were here, because I would have the pleasure of telling him that the people of Singapore are so pleased he appointed Mr. Desmond Lee to his cabinet. we love Desmond. And he has a very important and challenging portfolio, the Ministry of National Development. Because one of the challenges facing Singapore is how to reconcile the imperative of development with the imperative of sustainability and protecting the environment. And if anybody can, I have faith in you, Minister Desmond, that you will do it for all of us. I also want to salute my boss, Professor Tan Eng Chai, who is doing a wonderful job as President NUS. I want to confess to all of you that I had many jobs in my life, but the only job I've applied to was to teach at the NUS Law School. And in spite of many financial temptations, I've never resigned from the university. So I'm one of your loyal employees, HI. There are a few other people in the audience I would like to salute. Dr. Cheong Choon Kong. Dr. Cheong belongs to that rare team of people who have made Singapore Airlines the best airline in the world. Yeah. Choon Kong, we are very proud of you and your team who have made Singapore proud and continue to make SIA the most admired airline in the world. Yeah. And I want to mention Daniel Teo, one of Singapore's Renaissance men who accomplished in so many fields. Finally, I want to say to Eng Chai that you have a wonderful dean at the medical school. Professor Chong Yap Seng, whom I had not met before, has been sending me his faculty's publications. Yeah? And they are wonderfully written and designed, you know. Some are in the form of graphic novels. And I must confess that one of them, White Coat Tales, brought tears to my eyes. So well done, Prof. Chong, and keep up your good work. Prof. John Wong gave me the wrong mandate. He asked me to review the book. How can I review the book when I wrote the foreword of the book? That's a conflict of interest, right? So my mandate this afternoon is not to review the book, but to help sell the book. So I want to say to all those who are here and those who are watching us online that I want to give you 3 reasons why you should buy this book. First reason, you will learn from this book that there is an inextricable link between nature and human health. Yeah. Our Japanese friends have a saying that walking in the forest and parks is forest bathing. They believe that forest bathing is good for your physical, mental, and social health. And the American Park Service agree with this. If you go to WHO, you will find on one of the walls this inspiring inscription: preserve and protect the source of human health, nature. So my first point is that this book is important because it illustrates the new wisdom that walking in the forest and in our parks and our gardens, and we are privileged in Singapore to have many of them, it's good for your physical, mental, and social health. The second reason why you should buy this book is that it contains 20 inspiring stories of extraordinary men and women many of whom have overcome poverty in their childhood, abusive parents, very humble beginnings to achieve very high positions in their profession, vocation, in a public service. And having read this book several times, I continue to be inspired by it. I think every story is an inspiring story. And the lesson I've learned from these 20 remarkable individuals is that it doesn't matter how bad your beginning is, but if you have the determination, the work ethic, the optimism, and if you're blessed with good luck, you will break through the poverty trap and with the help of bursaries and scholarships, attain education requirement, and then you ascend in your profession. The three values that I find common among these 20 individuals are hard work, grit and determination, and integrity. And I think those are very important values that will serve all of us well in our lives. The third reason you should buy this book is that all the authors are in their 60s, late 60s, I think. Huh? Many of them are retired from their professions and occupations. And I want to use this occasion to urge the Singapore government to join the global campaign against ageism. Yeah. The UN is waging a campaign against ageism, and a few days ago, the UN published a 169-page global report on ageism. just think, these 20 individuals are still physically healthy, mentally competent, still full of energy. Isn't it a shame that they were forced to retire? And we're so short of human resource in Singapore. So the important point I want to make is that the whole world suffers from ageism, and Singapore is unfortunately no exception. My dream, like that of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, is that one day we will abolish compulsory retirement. But until that day comes, let us join the UN's global campaign against ageism and pledge that just as we don't discriminate against somebody on the basis of his race, his religion, or gender, we should not discriminate against someone on the basis of his or her age. Those are 3 good reasons why you should buy the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tomiko. That was very insightful. And yeah, let's now welcome our next captivating speaker, Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi, former Speaker of Parliament, to share a few words, being one of the writers and book editors himself. Mr. Tarmugi, please.
Well, I'm sorry to be up here instead of down the floor, at the floor, like Prof. Tomiko, because I'm less confident than he is, so I've got to have something in between myself and the distinguished gathering here. Well, Mr. Desmond Lee, Minister for National Development and Minister in charge for Social Services Integration, Professor Tan Chai, President NUS, Professor Chong Yop Seng, the Dean, Yong Yulin School of Medicine, NUS, Prof. Tomiko, my mentor, my idol, Ambassador at Large, MFA, and Dr. Cheong Chun Kong, Chairman of Mind Science Center. When Prof. Kwai Hyok, he was responsible for all this, approached me to co-edit the book. I was at first a bit unsure because whether I could do it, because my last experience at editing and writing was at Straits Times almost 4 decades ago. But I just couldn't miss the opportunity of doing it, because it's such a very attractive proposition, actually, right? I mean, to edit essays of my colleagues in the NAMAS group. Now, the book project itself took about 10 months from its conceptualization to writing, to editing, to printing, and to here, till today, its launch. Prof. Kwai Hyok actually started it, he initiated it, but the real initiator of this whole project is the late Wee Sin Tok. I think he approached you before he passed on. It was sometime in January, I think, Prof. Kwai. He expressed the wish, that something could be written about the group or people in the group, because he found their stories so interesting. And Prof. Kwai picked it up on exactly on May 27, Vesak Day it was. And here we are today. Now, and the book project is a very interesting project because it was held during the COVID period. So we had to overcome COVID restrictions of not being able to meet. We have to communicate through Zoom, through WhatsApp, to SMSs, and I don't want to say this, but sneakily sometimes we meet each other in person. But, so it was challenging in that sense, but it was also, in my view, a very commendable achievement. Despite all the constraints, we managed to pull it off, as it were. Now, this book, to me at least, I think is a very worthwhile project, and certainly something I'm proud to be associated with. Excuse me. Now, the book comprises essays by 20 members of NAMAS. NAMAS is the group which I belong to, and most of the members are here. We started working sometime in November 2019 on Saturdays. And while walking, we exchanged views, we spoke, we interacted. And it was during those sessions that we thought each has got some interesting thing to tell about their life, what they've gone through. And so that was how our late friend Sinto picked up the idea of having a compendium of sorts, or a book of sorts, to record all the experiences, all the life stories as well of our friends. Now, it's a worthwhile project because we are mostly baby boomers. Mean age, I think, has been calculated by Professor Kua, is 68. So we are actually more than the age you mentioned, Prof. These are people born after World War II, after the trauma and the devastation of the world, of the wars. And there was a time where you had to pick up the pieces, build up your life again, and proceed. And fortunately, all these 20 are able to be here today. So, and these are the people who have sung 3 national anthems: God Save the Queen, Negaraku, and Majulah Singapura. Now, the brief that Ihyok and myself gave to the writers was simple. It must be a first-person story. In other words, you must tell your own story. It must be in your own words. And you must capture the person. You must define the person. And you must write it as though it's the person himself who's talking, so that you could capture the nuances, the details, the feelings in each of their stories. So if you read through the book, you will find some as if they were telling a story, reminiscing as it were. Others wistfully thinking about the past, what they did. And some others even cathartically, they speak what they felt. So in that sense, it's a very interesting book. Interesting in the sense that this is not myth, this is not fiction, but this is real. These are real people, not some big-time world leader or world personality. This is real people living their own lives, from humble families, from poor families, and having been able to reach where they are now. So in that sense, I think it's more important than any other book because it's real. It's real, it's something achievable. And if you read at each of these stories, you'll find that each has got ways and means to progress what they went through in life. Hard work, as mentioned by Professor Koh, hard work, determination, perseverance, dare, grit, even luck. And so it is this indefatigability, this resilience, that's this common across all the 20 writers in the book. So, being the second salesman from Mr. Tommy Koo, I commend you to read the book. Because it's a fulfilling project for us. And each person, each man and woman who wrote their pieces have a story to tell. And I like just, some of the difficulties they went through. I just pick out a sentence from one of the essays by Mr. Su Eng Hyong. During his 70s, early 70s, I think it was, he finished his schooling, he didn't know what to do, or he wanted to progress further, but coming from a humble family, he was unable to go abroad or to further his studies. So apparently his father somehow managed to accumulate some money so that he could afford to buy him a one-way ticket to London to study. So this is what Eng Hyong wrote after that. I was alone in a foreign land. That is after he reached London. I was alone in a foreign land with only £100 in my pocket. Now, £100 is quite a big amount of money in those days. I remember when I was in London in 71, 72, it was $7.7 to the pound. And this was about 74, I think. So he says, with only £100 in my pocket and a promise from a friend to help me find accommodation in the city. And his last words, I was 17 years old. So it's a kind of great, the kind of push that we want for our citizens. The resilience to pick yourself up. And to move. So before I start shedding more tears, I would like to end by thanking Minister Desmond Lee for graciously coming to this event. I'd like to thank all writers for their contributions and for so generously sharing their life stories. And lastly, though certainly not the least, I would like to thank everyone for being here, participating in this launch event. So, take care. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tarmugi. That was certainly heartfelt, of true reflection and purpose. Next, may I please invite Mr. Desmond Lee, Minister for National Development and Minister in charge of Social Services Integration, on stage to officiate the book launch with a short address. Minister, please.
Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi, former speaker, Professor Tommy Koh, Ambassador at Large, or Ambassador with a big heart, Prof. Tan Ning Chai, President of NUS, Prof. Chong Yap Seng, Dean of NUS Yong Lulin School of Medicine, Dr. Cheong Choong Kong, Chairman of NUHS Mind Science Center, Prof. Kwai Hyok, Professor in Psychiatry and Neuroscience and Advisor of the Mind Science Center, Professor John Wong, ladies and gentlemen, friends. This book launch adds to the growing body of literature about mental health and well-being. And it also will cover topics about anxiety and stress. And I think you can imagine speaking after Professor John Wong, after Prof. Tommy Koh, and former speaker Abdullah Tarmugi, the amount of stress and anxiety I'm under. Such eminence and prominence that the speakers before me have displayed over the decades in setting the foundations for what Singapore is today. I remember when the former speaker was presiding over Parliament, and before that, heading the predecessor of one of my ministries, the MCY, looking after community issues, community bonding, building resilience, and Prof. Tomiko walking the world stage and helping Singapore to punch above our weight in so many fields. I was then wearing shorts in school. So it is with great humility that I endeavor to deliver these remarks in the presence of such eminent company. But grateful for your invitation this afternoon for the Tiang Seng Distinguished Lecture, as well as the launch of this very important book on the profiles in resilience. The book, edited by Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi and Prof. Kwai Hyok, is an important collection of heartfelt essays by participants of the Nature and Mindfulness Awareness Study, or NAMAS. And I had the privilege to meet them last year at Hot Park. Even in the midst of a crisis, an economic crisis, a health crisis, or social crisis, and a mental health crisis, that this important work marked its important next milestone. The NAMAS is based on the fundamental idea that a mindful walk in the rainforest and nature, with the healing powers of greenery and the environment, can benefit our mental, physical, and social health. We've always felt that it was so, but eminent scientists have proven that it is indeed so. And I'm sure that many of us here can attest to the joys of being out of the urban scape and in nature. Especially during this COVID period, many of us, because travel has been so restricted, have had this silver lining of being able to explore the length and breadth of Singapore, the little-known areas, the less traversed parts of Singapore, and of course, the emerald gems in the midst of a city, and have been valuable spaces for rest, recreation, respite, and just time away from the flurry of terrible news about the crisis in and around the world. And indeed, as Prof. Tomiko exhorted earlier, this is one important reason why we have to continue to look after our green spaces in Singapore. And one important reason why we have pushed for a city in nature. And we are pushing for this vision of a city in nature, not in spite of, but because of the greater developmental pressures that we are under today. And these are pressures that force us to turn a challenge into a virtue through the Singaporean willingness to be practical, to be able to navigate trade-offs, to be able to pull people together and make some challenging decisions, but being able to come together. And these challenges in terms of our land use, for housing, for the economy, for recreational spaces, for important amenities, including public health institutions and facilities, for active aging, and also for preschools. These are a result of a confluence of factors. For example, the blessing of eco-boomers. Mr. Tarmugi talked about the boomer generation, but we are here in the midst now seeing the eco-boomers coming of age. The eco-boomers are the children of the baby boomers, and now seeking to form families and the next generation. These housing needs and land use needs are also a result of a blessing of longevity and good health, and the need to then continue to support our seniors to be able to live good, fulfilling, healthy, and happy lives. It is also a result of our blessing of having diversity of aspirations, both in sports, in arts, in culture, and in the pursuits of entrepreneurship and enterprise. But we need to protect our green spaces because we are like no other country in the world, being one of the only sovereign city-states in the world. Ours is both a burden and a blessing. To have, in the midst of one of the densest cities in the world, veins of green arteries and an emerald heart of our nature reserves. And hence, a continued conversation that we need to have with Singaporeans on how we balance all these needs and at the end of the day, ensure that the most precious biodiversity, the most important habitats, the contiguities of connectivity that enable the other residents of these islands, our flora and fauna, to be able to move, to be able to disperse, and to be able to thrive so that our future generations have that thrill, that marvel, and sometimes the spectacle of nature, even in the heart of this busy, busy, bustling city. And another reason why we need to protect our green spaces, both big and small, beyond the ecological explanations of connectivity and diversity, is to enable Singaporeans to benefit from the therapeutic balm that nature offers to our minds, to our spirit, and to our being. And so I receive with a lot of humility Prof. Tomiko's exhortation that going forward, the next generation of Singaporeans bearing this responsibility of charting our land use going forward will continue to fly the flag that earlier generations have flown, to make sure that pragmatism and purpose, passion are brought to the fore in order to make this place exceptional and exceptionally green. And I give you that assurance, Prof. Now, let me just say a little bit about the very eminent people who have contributed these gems to this book. Some of them came from very humble backgrounds, but rose to the top of their professions in every field through hard work, resilience, perseverance, creativity, and mental fortitude. They lived through the uncertainty of major events that followed Singapore's independence, from economic downturns to public health crises like SARS. And they grew together with Singapore, sharing in our country's progress and achievements, riding the ups and sailing when it was down. Their stories are uplifting, inspiring, and for the younger generation who have not hitherto experienced existential crises or the depths of poverty and deprivation through which many of the eminent contributors have lived through and experienced firsthand. It gives us strength and perspective as we continue to battle this multi-pronged, multi-angled pandemic. Indeed, it has taken an emotional and psychological toll on many people, many Singaporeans, especially the most vulnerable. And even for frontliners, even those in public service, without realizing it, it just chips away. And a certain fatigue that is felt through all the impositions that public health has placed upon our daily lives. Some Singaporeans have lost their livelihoods, and all of us continue to grapple with an uncertain future. A certain sense of calm and awe and normality is settled upon us, but I think deep down inside us, we know that things are not all right, that we still have quite a way to go. And we have to make sure that we continue to hold the hands of the people around us and continue to uplift the least amongst us so that they, like all of us, can get through this crisis together. And so we need to support each other to get through this difficult time, come out of this crisis stronger and more resilient, and united as one. And on the part of the government, we are doing our part and must continue to do our part to support the mental well-being of Singaporeans, especially during this difficult time. For example, at the start of circuit breaker last year, my colleagues and I discussed and said, we are going to enter into a circuit breaker. You know, it's a very graphic description of what the public health intentions are, to circuit break. But it is not a medical solution. It is a solution that, in public health terms, requires the discipline of the human spirit and for society to recognize that we are the only means through which disease can spread. And so we felt that the constraints and impediments that will be imposed, that are so unprecedented, require us to ensure that there's a safety valve through the setting up of a line, a safety line, and we called it the National Care Hotline, to provide a listening ear, to make sure that people open up their hearts and that someone listens, and provide psychological first aid to Singaporeans. And during the crisis, through Zoom, I met and spoke to, my colleagues spoke to a number of people who are manning the hotlines, and the stories you hear, some are too graphic for me to describe, of how they have literally saved lives through their intervention on the phone and enabled the emergency services to pull people from the brink. And to that group of unsung heroes, I salute and thank you. That hotline has managed over 40,000 calls since April last year, and has been a very valuable resource in helping Singaporeans cope with the stress and anxiety brought by the pandemic. And of those 40,000, many of them do result in follow-ups, actions, interventions, a cry for help, followed by and coupled by an enveloping of support. We also set up the Interagency COVID-19 Mental Wellness Task Force last October to find ways to address the impact of the pandemic on the mental health of Singaporeans. But beyond the efforts of the government, we can have much bigger impact when the community pulls together. Not just rhetorically, not just aspirationally, but actually in a coordinated, practical way, integrate and pull together to lend our energies and efforts to support mental well-being. So invisible, so silent, so unpredictable, and yet so deadly and frightening sometimes, the way it manifests itself. And the government can bring people together and provide support and resources. But it is often the community itself that best understands what the real needs are on the ground and how these can be addressed. And so science informs us and advises us that, mental health strikes young. It strikes young. And so we set up a youth mental well-being last year, just before the pandemic blew into a storm. And it's an instance of what we call an alliance for action, an open call, a willingness to embrace people who step forward. And we had more than 1,000 people sign up and say, I want to be a part of this. I want to be part of this national movement to tackle the threat that mental health poses on our young, exacerbated by this newfangled thing called social media and all the emotional pressures and strains it can inflict on people who are sometimes just a bit too informed and too consumed by it. And these alliances create community partnerships that focus on taking concrete actions led by the people and supported by government to address these pressing needs. And this Youth Mental Being Network brings together members of the community, brings together recovering mental health individuals, brings together professionals, brings together academics, community leaders, to try out new ideas to better support our youth mental well-being, but most importantly, to see our efforts not in silo, but as a network that cascades across societies and communities and neighborhoods, both institutional and community-based. Network members have already initiated close to 30 potential projects so far. And one example is drifting, and there was a drifting session last night. I saw it on my chat group, which is an outreach program that aims to provide positive peer support for at-risk youth. I'm also happy that the NUHS Mind Science Centre is also working with the community actively to improve mental health in Singapore. For example, I talked about the youth earlier, the inflicting of mental health challenges on our seniors too is something that we must pay close attention. And so the Age Well Everyday program is a volunteer-driven program that I would like to commend. The volunteers interact closely with seniors through activities like health education, physical exercise, and the practice of mindful awareness. This can help to delay the onset of dementia, reduce anxiety and depression, and improve the quality of life for seniors on our island. And the Mind Science Center will also launch a new therapeutic rainforest program. I'm very excited to hear that. The idea is similar to NAMAS, that interacting with nature can help bring many health benefits, including adaptability and resilience. And this new initiative is targeted this time at undergraduates to help them build their mental resilience, to cope with the stresses and strains of this new age. But at the same time, we must recognize that even though we focus on the topic of mental health and bring lots of resources to bear and lots of science, that very often mental health issues are caused or compounded by many other challenges in life. Financial challenges, educational difficulties, unmet expectations, family stressors, and so on. And things get more complex when families face interlocking combinations of these difficulties. Perhaps a parent is suffering from mental health issues, another is incarcerated due to challenges with the law, children lack a stable home environment and find it difficult to stay in school. And these pressures, and what I just articulated, just one example that we see often, especially in low-income, vulnerable families, worsen the parents' mental health problems, and the health and social link is well documented by research, and likewise social health, and becomes a vicious circle. And in such cases, to help the families overcome the challenges, we cannot tackle each issue in isolation. And for a family, say in poverty, with these multiple interlocking issues, addressing the mental health issue alone, or addressing the financial issue alone, or housing stability, or food insecurity alone, will not be enough. Those efforts brought in some are meaningful, but not integrated, will remain a patchwork of interventions. And in such cases, to help these families, we need to understand their difficulties holistically. And so I've heard of healthcare institutions going to social prescribing, understanding health issues, but better understanding the social context, the familial context, the community context, in order to weave together a cohesive range of services, both by government and by community and healthcare agencies, to support the family and scaffold meaningful support around them. And the problem, as I said earlier, is often both charities, community groups, and government agencies. We specialize or subspecialize, and we focus on certain demographic. We look at issues and not people. We look at individuals and not families. And in our autonomy to serve, we fail to see the importance of partnership in supporting families, especially lower-income families. And so we need to work together across different agencies and organizations to provide coordinated and integrated social health community support. And this is one of the ways to tackle the most stubborn of inequalities in Singapore and I think anywhere else. And that is what we're striving to do in transforming our social safety nets in this new age. And one of our flagships that I'd like to just share with you is Community Link. Community Link, linking the community. And we're identifying and reaching out to 14,000 families with young children living in rental housing, the lowest income families in Singapore. And with young children, the morbid fear that poverty then gets inherited and transmitted. And through Comlink, we reach out proactively to these families, make meaningful and ethical use of data, understand their different needs holistically, including their mental health challenges, their job needs, schooling needs, and other needs, and then partner community, partner government agencies, partner healthcare agencies, based on identified need, and working with families to harness their assets so that they have the dignity of participating as an equal partner in addressing the inequalities that they face themselves. And so we aim to scale this program up. I wouldn't say it's a program, it's a platform, it's a mothership that enables people to come together with passion and purpose, to know that there's signposting and a holistic understanding of needs, to reduce wastage, but to maximize social impact. And so, in the next 2 years, an ambition to scale it up to 14,000 families, i.e. every one of the young families living in rental housing. No doubt, our acceleration, because COVID has told us that such an approach is needed, and such an approach allows us to walk that narrow, winding, difficult road to tackling stubborn inequality that no slogan or ideology can achieve. It's just that hard work. And so let me conclude by commending our organizers and authors and participants who've written so passionately in this book that adds to the compendium of knowledge about how nature adds to our psychological and physical well-being, and how all this work can then pull together in a holistic approach to enable Singaporeans to live well, live meaningfully, age well, and with purpose. So I thank you all and wish you all good health always.
Thank you for the enrichment and insightful sharing, Minister. Now, we would like to share with you a short clip which encapsulates the profiles in resilience, featuring our admirable writers as they strive through sheer grit, diligence, and perseverance. I believe that sparked much interest to grab a copy of the book. May I now invite Dr. Cheong Choon Kong, Chairman of Mind Science Centre, up on stage to present a copy of the book. To Minister Desmond Lee. Thank you, Mr. Desmond Lee and Dr. Cheong. Next, let's welcome Professor Kwa Ee Hyok to come on stage to open the next segment of the third Tao Tiang Seng Distinguished Lecture Series. Professor Kwa is a Tan Gyok In Professor of Psychiatry and Neuroscience and advisor to Mind Science Centre. With that, let's begin. Prof. Kwa, please.
Thank you, William. Honorable Minister, Mr. Desmond Lee, Ambassador at Large, Professor Tommy Koh, our former Speaker of Parliament, Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi, NUS President, Professor Tan Chai, Dean of Medicine, Professor Chong Yap Seng, Chairman of the Mind Science Center, Dr. C.K. Cheong, friends and colleagues. I understand there are more than 400 people watching from the comfort of their homes in this webinar, and even as far north as outside the country, as far north as Beijing in China, Malaysia, in KL, Ipoh, and further south in Sydney and Melbourne. We have many colleagues there watching this webinar. It is a beautiful Saturday afternoon. The launch of a new book by the birth of a child is a time for rejoicing. And it's double happiness to have Maestro Jeremy Monteiro to address us as the third Tao Tian Seng Distinguished Lecturer. Before I introduce the speaker, let me say a few words about the late Mr. Tao Tian Seng. He belonged to the pioneer generation, and he personified a profile in resilience. Born in China in Hainan Island, he came to Singapore after the war, and as a young lad, he worked as a waiter in the British Merchant Navy, and later in the Royal Dutch Shell Company. And he imbued in his children a sense of filial piety, a sense of integrity, and a sense of compassion. His son, Mr. Tao Heng Tan, has donated generously to NUS, to the medical school, and also the Mind Science Center. 2 years ago, he started a fund called Mind the Gap Mental Health to provide support for mental health services where there are gaps, and also for research. And last year, with the pandemic, many of the theater groups are going through difficult times, and there are also support for these groups, including drama box, pandemonium, and musical theater. The first Tao Tian Seng Distinguished Lecture was delivered by the prominent psychiatrist, Professor Norman Sartorius, the former director of mental health at the World Health Organization in Geneva. The second Tao Tian Seng lecture was delivered by Professor Hong Hai, the former dean of the business school at NTU and former member of parliament. And today we have our maestro, Jeremy Monteiro. He is also a visiting professor at the West London School of Music and a fellow of the Royal College of Music in London, and has received the Cultural Medallion from the President of Singapore. Lately, he has written a book called Late Night Thoughts of a Jazz Musician, and he chronicled his career, the long and winding road, the trial and tribulations. There is a term in psychology called word association, a technique used by the famous psychoanalyst Dr. Sigmund Freud. So last week, I asked a young doctor, do you know anything about jazz in Singapore? And he mentioned Jeremy Monteiro. So it appears that Mr. Jeremy Monteiro, or Maestro Jeremy Monteiro, has permeated into the subconscious of thousands of people in Singapore. We are very glad today that he's here to speak up for mental health and to talk to us on a topic on music or jazz is good for my mental health. Shall we welcome Maestro Jeremy Monteiro. Because we are in the new norm, he told me he probably feel more comfortable not to stand here to give a formal lecture, and prefers to sit in a comfortable chair, informal discussion, conversation with a degree of spontaneity. So we also have these compositions with a theme on mental health.
Thank you very much, Minister Desmond Lee. Nice to be here. Prof. Chang, really nice to be here. Also, when Professor Tomiko, Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi, and Prof. asked me to, asked me to do this, I really wasn't sure at all, because when I was young, when I was 14 years old, I declared to my parents that I wanted to be a professional musician. And they said to me, "You're crazy." And I told my friends I want to be a jazz musician. They also said to me, "You're crazy." So I'm really not sure if I should be the one as a crazy jazz musician to be speaking up for mental health. I'm very grateful. Professor Tomiko is not only all the things that you know him, but he is also the patron of the Jazz Association of Singapore. So and Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi also, having done so much and doing so much in Singapore, is also the treasurer of the Jazz Association Singapore, where I work as executive director and music director. So, and thank you very much for having me. You know, I'd like to talk a little bit of the role of music and art in society for a moment. Art and music goes all the way back to primal times with early man. And actually, the person who was the very important person in the village back in primal times was the shaman. And the shaman performed all the duties now that have been divided amongst other people. But in the early days, the shaman was the witch doctor, the medical person. He was the musician. He was the dancer or the choreographer to dance for the rains to come or the dance for the rains to go away. And very important person. While the rest went out to hunt and bring the food back, this one person did all this, the healing, the meteorologist, the musician, the dancer, the entertainer. So the shaman was like the original, I think one of the oldest professions was the entertainment services director. However, of course, as time went on, and the role of the shaman is very important, because one of the things that shaman helped people do was to see things that the normal people couldn't see. For example, when the Nina Pinto and Santa Maria came from Spain to the New World, the 3 Spanish galleons, none of the villagers could see these huge galleons on the horizon. And the shaman is documented to have had to teach the people to then actually see these huge galleons. So in the same way, the artists and the musicians helps to open up things in your mind and your pathways, as well as your heart. So I think it's a very important role that we have. Now, of course, the medicine goes to the doctors, and I don't dance, so the dance goes to the choreographers and dancers, and I concentrate mostly on my music. So that's the one role. Now, so just a quick thing about myself when I started. When I first started, I loved music, but there was a period I actually fell out of love with it. I hated it when I was 8 years old, because I went from having a very nurturing teacher to other teachers who made it all about the exams and made it all about, you know, trying to pass exams and not to indulge in this beautiful thing of music. So thankfully, I moved to Sabah, Kota Kinabalu. My father was working there. And at one point, I was hating my music lessons so much, and this is not a very nice story to tell, but I went and started my father's motorcycle. I was learning how to press the piano pedal, and I started my father's motorcycle till the engine was burning hot, and deliberately burned my leg on the motorcycle. That's how much I didn't want to practice. So I went in the house and my mother said, oh, you know, poor thing, why silly boy, what's wrong with you? And then she put butter, you know, the mothers like to put butter, any burn they put butter, you know. And then after about half an hour, she said, is your leg better? Is the pain gone? I said, yeah, Mom, I feel a bit better now. Okay, now you go and practice, but don't press the pedal. So backfired. But thankfully, very soon after that, my mother found a wonderful piano teacher who I am still in touch with. He's in his late 80s, Mr. Tan Zi Tong, and who, by the way, is watching from Kota Kinabalu now. And he made me fall in love with music again. And how he did it was, he was able to show me everything he was talking about. So he was talking about phrasing. He would be able to play a part of the music with bad phrasing and now beautiful phrasing. He was talking about expression. He could show me about expression. And I think these are the most powerful teachers, the teachers who not only talk, but are able to illustrate what they are trying to tell you to do. So he is responsible for me falling in love with music again. So that's my little preamble before we go on to talking about some of the music that I have for you.
So he has numerous compositions. I think there are 40 albums that you produce. And he has 3 songs for us. I think all the songs have mental health themes. So you're going to play for the first one and tell us how it inspired you.
So the first song is actually inspired by the writings of the famous psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who actually came up with the famous emotional map or grief stages, right, which all of you are familiar with. And grief, anger, bargaining, so on and so forth, and then moving towards acceptance. So we all have great loss in our life, part of the human condition, whether it's losing our health, losing all our money, losing a relationship, losing a loved one, people passing away. So an amalgamation of various losses. I put myself in the position of feeling all these losses. And then when just the sort of advent of reaching acceptance. So this piece is called Life Goes On. Now, the first part of the piece is about the reflection, that transition between great loss to coming to the point of acceptance, and then a little bit of ascendance, and then reflection of having passed the worst stages of grief. So now we'll play, and I'll point out to you the exact point, or maybe you try and hear the exact point when acceptance arrives, okay? Here's just a reflection of what has gone before and collecting of the thoughts. And here's where acceptance happens. And then rising above and away from the grief. Okay, so that's the excerpt I wanted to share.
Sure. So something on grief often happens to all of us. Loss of a family member, a friend, a pet. But sometimes grief triggers severe depression, and it's better to come for early assessment and management rather than wait for a long, long time. Yeah. because depression can also have a mortality, and that is suicide, you know. And I must say that although we spend millions of dollars over the years training more doctors, more psychiatrists, more psychologists, the suicide rate has remained very much the same. It should come down, much the same. Later on, I'll talk to you a bit on a new approach now, that is prevention. Can we do something for prevention? The second piece now.
So the second piece I'd like to share with you is the national song. There are 4 national songs before the National Day song started. So the 4 national songs are Stand Up for Singapore, Count on Me, Singapore, We Are Singapore, which I was the music director and arranger, and then I composed the 4th national song so far, which is One People, One Nation, One Singapore. And basically music is very powerful. Music has been used actually for evil, right? Hitler liked to use martial music to galvanize the people with his very bad ideology. But music is very powerful, can be used for good as well. So with my lyricist, Jim Aitchison, we sat down to come up with the story of Singapore together. And then Jim, being a good writer, lyricized the story we developed together, and then I wrote the melody. We did it actually in one afternoon at my place. And I wanted to just show you the power of music by playing you the first part of the song, which you all know, and then towards the last 1.5 minutes, where we wanted to really plant that feeling of patriotism in the Singaporeans' hearts. And we use a subliminal effect of adding 8 more voices at the very last chorus, but you don't really notice them, but subconsciously you feel it. And many people, when the song came out, felt that was the moment. They felt their goosebumps, felt their patriotism. And so we'll play the first part of the song first, One People, One Nation, One Singapore. And then the multi-racialism with the kuteng and the tabla.
We've built a nation with our hands, the toil of people from a dozen lands. Strangers when we first began, now we're Singaporean. Let's reach out for Singapore, join our hands forevermore. One people, one nation, one Singapore. That's the way that we will be forevermore. Every creed and every race has its role and has its place. One people, one nation, one.
If we go to the last part of the song, just scroll to that part that we. So here we added trumpets. And we added these 8 voices, which you can't really hear, but I think you can feel. So that's our national song that I was very happy to be involved in.
Yes. So something on togetherness, solidarity. 2 weeks ago, there was a gala performance by the Jazz Association. I was given a ticket by Mr. Abdullah Tarmugi. And as I watched the concert, it's very interesting, the jazz performance. We have started with Jeremy playing the keyboard at the grand piano, and then move on to the focus was on the bass guitarist, and then it went on to the drummer, and then the saxophonist, and back again to Jeremy. So I was thinking, this is wonderful, that able to work together in harmony, and they know for one moment the saxophonist takes the limelight and then move on. And I was thinking of that, maybe I should ask the Dean of Medicine that we should get all the professors to listen to jazz music, because sometimes, not only in Singapore, I've worked in England, America, sometimes the research centers, there's a lot of friction. Everyone thinks it's a prima donna. Everyone want to fight with each other. So they listen to your jazz music. They come to work together in harmony. They know how to get on together. You think it's a good idea, Professor Chong Yap Seng? I'm sure you should. Yeah. Listen to jazz music. Right.
I think in my book, Late Night Thoughts of a Jazz Musician, I related a story that Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong told me about how he said that his father, then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, felt that his original cabinet was like a jazz band because they were able to work independently, take the limelight, forge forward with their own initiatives, and then be able to come back to the core, and also then we have solidarity as a unit. So I think we are very lucky because now we see that our current ministers like Desmond Lee has the same sort of ability to be able to extemporize and talk without having any teleprompter, and be able to be so articulate. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
So do you suggest to minister that they should have a jazz band in the
Why
cabinet?
not?
So next song, please.
Yeah. So the last song is really talking about improvisation, and I think I was very, very grateful that jazz and some other musics, but jazz in particular, is now an O-level subject. So 2 years ago, Minister Ong Ye Kung announced at the Jazz Association Singapore Lion City Youth Jazz Festival, and I believe that I would love to see it not be just a music elective program, but also part of the mainstream for younger students, because jazz actually is wonderful it's a great way to promote heuristic thinking, improvisation, troubleshooting. So jazz basically gives one the template, whether you end up being a jazz musician or not, but it gives you, a jazz musician is also a sort of intuitive mathematician, because you are given a certain amount of time and you are supposed to, on the fly, create, different sonic sounds, notes, and also subdivisions of time with rhythm, and make sure that it all fits very nicely without using a calculator, right? So this kind of thinking, I think, promotes not just within the sphere of being a musician, but just being a person, to have this kind of ability to extemporize, improvise, troubleshoot, and so on and so forth. So the last song just illustrates a little bit of improvisation. I wrote this song after a long tour, traveling around the world performing, landing at Changi Airport, looking out the window of the plane and seeing my Singapore and just feeling a sense of homecoming. And so I wrote this song called Homecoming, which is a very happy sort of ASEAN-sounding beat with the drums and so on and so forth. A melody, a happy, joyous melody, but then later on there's a fair bit of improvisation by the saxophonist, the great Ernie Watts, who's a two-time Grammy winner, and myself and others. So this is Homecoming. So this is the written part, inspired by the approach of the aircraft. And now here I'm just extemporizing, improvising on the melody, one at a time. I think that's good. So just to say that the whole idea of jazz is that the melody is written. Very often people think that when jazz musicians play, they just tembak, you know. But it's all based on the rules of Western harmony and the use of the modes, available note scale, whether it's the Lydian mode or the Dorian scale. So basically on the fly, the jazz musician is doing instant composition. Another interesting difference, people have asked me, what's the difference between a classical musician? And I'm a classically trained pianist, so I admire my classical musician friends and jazz musician. And basically a classical musician is like someone who is either reads from a teleprompter or from a prepared speech or memorizes a speech. And then a jazz musician is more like the person who looks at cue cards, maybe 5, 6 points, and can speak for an hour and a half just based on the triggers of whatever. That's more of a jazz musician. So both very important skills, I think.
So listening to this composition, home and the family is a very powerful institution in our lives and of great importance, especially in mental health. I was explaining to Jeremy during lunch that we've done a couple of studies here in Singapore, and it's amazing because we found that the outcome of treatment here in Singapore has been very, very good in terms of the prognosis. For example, the treatment of alcoholism, the study here at NUH, 68% remain abstinent after a year. This is much better than in the UK or America. And I was invited to give a lecture in King's College. And I told them the main difference, I work in England and America, is that every patient of discharge in NUH goes back home. The family cares for the person. Whereas in England and America, we have to look for a hostel for the person. So family care is tremendous, I think, for all of us to understand. And I often tell my students, when you go back home and there's food on the table, do you thank your mother for the food on the table? Are you appreciative, or even a helper? You know, sometimes takes things for granted. You know. There are a couple of questions. You don't mind? I think one asks whether, I know time is catching up very quickly, maybe 1 or 2 questions. They ask, when you are down in the doldrums, in the feeling blue, which piece would you want to play or listen to?
Well, sometimes, you need to get past the feelings of sadness or whatever, and so you may actually want to play a song that makes you feel your emotion of sadness. Because I think people are always trying to disown emotions. You can't disown anger. I mean, you have to learn to express it properly. You don't have to lash out with anger, for example, but you learn how to express anger in a good way. So with music, I think what's wonderful is that you can actually play a piece. Or I love silence. I think the key to a successful life is the balance between stillness and motion. So basically, sitting down and playing the piano and just feeling the silence, as it were, similar to even a meditation or so. But just play a nice piece, feel the sadness, let it just arise and just leave you. Or sometimes you need to just go straight to a happy song, and use it as a way to infuse some joy into your psyche.
Yes, the 20 people who wrote the book, they have also a chat group. And last week, one of them, Professor Lim Soo Pin, our previous Auditor General, he sent a note to all of us that, well, I always loved Paris because I remember as a young person, I went to Paris, and I was looked after by the former ambassador, Mr. David Marshall. And he went to one full time in Paris, listened to Maurice Chevalier. And then I told him that there is a line in an old film called Casablanca, in which Humphrey Bogart said, "We always have Paris," he told the girlfriend. And then Professor Hong Hai sent a note that there is an interesting song in Casablanca called "As Time Goes By," played by the jazz musician Seng. Yeah. And so whenever Sam played the song As Times Go By, Humphrey Bogart will think about Paris. So this is called music reminiscence. So sometimes music helps to bring up happy memories. There's just one more question. I know time is catching up again. Mental health is not just about depression and anxiety, and misery, also happiness. So someone asked, when you're very happy, what song would you want to play?
A jazz musician has in their repertoire, in their head. That's why we don't often have to look at music. Anything from 300 to 3,000 songs. So I'm about at the 700 or 800 mark. But what makes me happy? I mean, it's very hard to choose. Yeah. I mean, firstly, I'm a Gemini. I have no favorite anything. So it's hard for me to choose one favorite thing. But yeah, I mean, it's very. I'm sorry, I cannot give an answer because I can't call.
Okay.
Can't call which is my favorite song.
Maybe the day you receive a note from NUS that you are selected to be the third Tao Tian Seng Distinguished Lecturer, you must be ecstatic. Yeah. Which song will you quickly go and play then?
No, originally we are supposed to have a piano here, and for me to not just talk but actually play some music live for you. But unfortunately, the guidelines are such that we cannot have that. So we apologize for using just the recordings. But I was very frightened when they said they're going to take the piano away from me, because I hide behind the piano most of the time. But I think that I was firstly a bit worried, but I was also very, very happy to have the opportunity. My son actually is a counseling psychologist and he's finishing his master's degree in addictions. So I was telling you, I'm the crazy guy, and no problem, because at home we have a psychologist to psycho me and make sure that I don't go crazy.
Right, I have to close with a few comments. And firstly, the first song talks about some mental health symptoms of anxiety, denial, anger, and these are common things. So some of the mental health symptoms are episodic. But what we are doing now in the Mind Science Center are preventive programs. There are two programs called Age Well Every Day for the prevention of dementia and depression, and the second is called the Therapeutic Rainforests. Both the programs were selected 3 weeks ago for the World Congress because they were so excited with the result, and that there is something positive coming up, because often at World Congress they'll tell you about the pandemic, the suicide rate is high. So someone said, hey, there's good news from Singapore. And early in the morning, the conference was on a Saturday. Early on Sunday, the chairman of Congress sent me a note. This is very good news. The second song was about coming together. And I think, once again, the programs, the reason why the World Health is keen on the program, because the cost is so low, because we depended so much on volunteers. And there are so many volunteers in this room helping out, and even watching the webinar. And this is tremendous, because in the world there are 4 centers doing dementia research. One in Paris, one in Helsinki, one in Tokyo, and in Singapore. And the one in Singapore was chosen because we didn't spend too much money. The one in Helsinki told me they spent 6 million euros. And here we have volunteers, and on top of it, we have people who donated so much to the research. Even for therapeutic rainforest, it's Mr. Tao Heng Tan's and the Mind the Gap Research Fund has been given. So we have lots of people and volunteers coming out. So the third song is about the improvisation, all right, and coming together. And this is very important, especially now in the pandemic. We're talking about mental resilience. There are 2 aspects of mental resilience: the personal, the individual mental resilience, and the resilience of the community. We're talking about the community, and the improvisation comes from creativity. There are 2 parts of it: creativity and having mental resilience to help us ride through the pandemic. And the bedrock of creativity and mental resilience is mental health. You must have that. So we are hoping that one of the hindrance is more the stigma, and the stigma should be a concern of all of us, and the effort to get rid of the stigma should involve all of us, and also all those who paced the corridors of power. And I want to thank Maestro Jeremy Monteiro, all our volunteers, all our donors, including Mr. Tao Hing Tan, and of course our minister, Mr. Desmond Lee, is always very supportive. In fact, one doctor told me he looks very youthful and cool. I said, well, because he walks the rainforest and the parks, and I'm sure, I hope you will introduce the rainforest to the rest of the cabinet ministers, and I'm sure Gyok Hua could teach them how to walk mindfully. And of course, the champion for mental health in this room is Professor Tommy Koh. He not only speaks up for mental health, he writes for mental health in a Straits Time. So thank you once again for all your support, and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, professors. With that, we have come to the closing of our webinar. Dear esteemed guests online, please get in touch with us via the contact details shown on your screen if you have any questions. And please join us on our online community at facebook.com/MindScienceCenter. We would also appreciate if you would be able to participate in a post-event survey following this. Thank you very much once again, Mr. Tao and family, and each and every one of you for joining us today. Have a fabulous weekend.